Something strange happened in the 1970s. Television dared to imagine the future, then quietly erased it. Entire worlds appeared for a moment, then vanished without warning. No reruns, no celebration, no second chance. Just silence. These were not ordinary failures. These were ideas too early, too different, too unsettling. Shows that slip through time itself. And what remains today feels less like nostalgia and more like lost transmissions from a future we never reached. Number 12. The Starlost, 1973. A drifting ark lost in silence, a civilization trapped inside a machine that no one understands anymore. That was the promise of the Starlost. It was not just a science fiction show. It was an existential warning about humanity forgetting its own purpose. The story unfolds inside a massive generational ship carrying the last survivors of Earth. Entire societies live inside sealed domes, each believing they are alone. They farm, they worship, they repeat rituals. They have no idea they are drifting toward extinction. At the center of this mystery stands a young man who begins to question everything. What he discovers is terrifying. The ship is dying. Systems are failing, and no one is in control. What makes this show haunting is not its effects, but its ideas. It tried to explore isolation belief systems and the collapse of knowledge, but behind the scenes, chaos destroyed its potential. Scripts were rewritten, budgets collapsed. Even the legendary writer Harlan Ellison abandoned the project and removed his name. The result feels broken, yet strangely hypnotic. Episodes drift between brilliance and confusion. Characters appear and vanish. Worlds are introduced and forgotten. It is as if the show itself became the lost ship it was trying to portray. And that is why it vanished. Not because it failed completely, but because it was too ambitious for television at the time. Networks could not support it. Audiences could not follow it. Today, it survives like a ghost signal from the past, a warning echoing through static. A show that tried to say something profound and got erased before anyone could truly hear it. Number 11. Search, 1972. Before surveillance became reality, before wearable tech invaded daily life, there was a show that predicted it all with eerie precision. Search did not feel like science fiction. It felt like classified information leaking onto television screens. The concept was deceptively simple. Highly trained agents were sent into dangerous missions equipped with advanced technology, cameras embedded in their eyes, sensors tracking every movement, a command center watching everything in real time, every heartbeat, every decision, every mistake. What made this series unique was its structure. Each mission unfolded like a live operation. Viewers were not just watching, they were inside the system, seeing through the agent's perspective, experiencing tension through fragmented visuals and constant communication. Decades before modern tech companies built similar tools, this show imagined a world where privacy no longer existed, where individuals became extensions of machines, where control was centralized and invisible. Yet audiences in the early 70s were not ready. The pacing felt clinical. The tone felt cold. It lacked the emotional hooks that mainstream viewers expected. And so, despite its innovation, it quietly disappeared after one season. Looking back now, it feels almost unsettling. The devices shown on screen resemble technology we carry every day. Surveillance networks once considered fiction now define entire societies. Search was not canceled because it was weak. It was canceled because it was ahead of its time. It showed a future that felt uncomfortable, a future people were not ready to confront. And like many truths revealed too early, it was buried, not forgotten by accident, but ignored because it hit too close to reality. Number 10. The Fantastic Journey, 1977. A storm appears without warning. A ship vanishes into mist, and suddenly reality no longer follows any known rule. That is how the fantastic journey begins, not with logic, but with disorientation. A group of strangers finds themselves trapped inside the Bermuda Triangle. But this is not the ocean the world knows. This is a fractured dimension where time collapses and civilizations exist side by side. Ancient warriors live next to futuristic cities. Mystics walk beside scientists. Every episode becomes a collision between worlds that should never meet. At its core, the show is about survival in a place where cause and effect no longer exist. Characters are forced to adapt, not just physically, but psychologically. Nothing is stable. Trust becomes fragile. Every new land could be salvation or destruction. What makes this series fascinating is its ambition. It tried to blend science fiction with mythology and philosophical questions about time, identity, and destiny. But the execution struggled. Budgets limited the scale. Scripts shifted tone constantly. One episode felt like fantasy. The next felt like hard science fiction. Audiences could not anchor themselves, and when viewers feel lost, they disconnect. Despite its flaws, there is something haunting about its world. The idea that entire realities could exist hidden beyond perception. That human understanding is just a thin layer over something far stranger. The show did not fail because it lacked imagination. It failed because it had too much of it. Too many ideas. Too many directions. And so it disappeared into the same kind of mystery it tried to explore. A signal swallowed by the unknown. Number 9. Ark II, 1976. The world has already ended. Civilization is gone. What remains is silence broken only by scattered survivors trying to rebuild what they barely remember. That is the landscape of Ark II. Not a story about destruction, but about what comes after. At the center of this broken Earth travels a mobile scientific unit. A team of researchers moves across wastelands carrying knowledge like a fragile flame. Their mission is simple in theory: restore civilization, preserve what humanity has lost, teach those who have forgotten. But the reality is far more complicated. Each encounter reveals a different kind of collapse. Some communities have turned to violence, others cling to distorted beliefs. Technology is feared, knowledge is rejected. Progress becomes a threat instead of a solution. What makes this show unique is its tone. It is not driven by action, it is driven by ideas. Environmental warnings echo through every episode. Questions about responsibility and survival are woven into each conflict. Long before climate anxiety became global, this series was already asking what happens when the planet can no longer support us. Yet that same seriousness became its weakness. Younger audiences found it slow. Networks found it unprofitable. And so it lasted only a single season before fading away. Today, it feels strangely relevant. The fears it explored no longer feel distant. They feel immediate. Ark II was not just telling a story about the future, it was holding up a mirror. And perhaps that is why it was quietly removed. Because sometimes the most dangerous stories are the ones that feel too real. Number 8. Salvage 1, 1979. A dream that sounds impossible. A man looks at the sky and does not see mystery. He sees opportunity. That is the strange heartbeat of Salvage 1. Not a government mission. Not a military operation. Just an ordinary man who decides space is the next place to find value. The story follows a junk dealer who builds his own rocket using scrap materials and raw determination. While others chase prestige or exploration, he chases profit. The idea is simple. There is abandoned equipment in space, satellites, capsules, lost technology, and he wants to bring it back. What makes this series unique is its grounded perspective. Space is not treated as a distant frontier filled with heroes. It becomes a workplace, a risky, unpredictable environment where human ambition collides with reality. Every mission feels improvised. Every success feels fragile. There is a quiet charm in watching something so improbable slowly take shape. The rocket looks handmade because it is. The crew feels uncertain because they are. This is not polished science fiction. It is rough human curiosity reaching beyond its limits. Yet that same tone confused audiences. It was not epic enough for spectacle, not comedic enough for light entertainment. It existed somewhere in between, and television rarely rewards uncertainty. After a brief run, the show faded without resistance. No dramatic cancellation, no controversy, just silence. But the idea remains powerful. That exploration does not always begin with institutions. Sometimes, it begins with one person refusing to accept limits. A fragile dream launched into an indifferent sky, and then quietly forgotten. Number 7. The Gemini Man, 1976. Invisibility sounds like power. The ability to disappear, to move unseen, to control situations without being detected. But in The Gemini Man, that power comes with a cost that slowly destroys the man who carries it. The story centers on a secret agent exposed to radiation that grants him the ability to become invisible. At first, it feels like an advantage. Missions become easier. Enemies become vulnerable. But the effect is unstable. Each use drains his life. Each moment unseen brings him closer to death. What begins as a tactical edge becomes a psychological burden. The character is forced into a constant calculation. Use the power and succeed, or preserve his life and risk failure. There is no safe choice, only consequences. This internal conflict gives the show a darker tone than expected. Beneath the espionage lies a story about identity and isolation. When a man cannot be seen, he begins to question if he still exists in any meaningful way. Relationships become strained. Trust erodes. The mission consumes everything. Despite this compelling premise, the series struggled to find an audience. It was positioned as action but driven by introspection. Viewers expecting excitement found something more restrained. Networks saw declining numbers and made a quick decision. The show disappeared before it could evolve. Another idea cut short before reaching its full potential. What remains is a haunting concept: power that erases the self. A hero who becomes less human every time he succeeds. And a story that faded just as it began to reveal its true depth. Number 6. Space Academy, 1977. A classroom floating in the void. Young minds training to navigate a future that has not yet arrived. That is the fragile premise of Space Academy. On the surface, it feels simple: a group of students learning science and discipline aboard a distant space station. But beneath that simplicity lies something more revealing. This was a vision of the future filtered through hope. A belief that humanity would not just survive in space, but build systems of education and growth. Every lesson carried an assumption. That knowledge would guide us forward. That curiosity would remain intact even beyond Earth. The series follows cadets as they face challenges that test both intelligence and character. Problems are solved through logic. Conflicts are resolved through understanding. It presents a world where progress depends on cooperation rather than conflict, but that tone worked against it. The late 70s had already begun to shift. Audiences were drawn toward spectacle, toward intensity, toward stories that pushed boundaries with scale and danger. Against that backdrop, Space Academy felt too gentle, too contained. Production limitations added to the problem. Sets felt small. Visuals lacked impact. The sense of wonder that the concept demanded never fully materialized on screen. And so it disappeared quietly, not rejected with anger, simply overlooked. Yet there is something quietly powerful in what it attempted. A future built on learning rather than domination. A belief that the next frontier would not be conquered through force, but understood through knowledge. It may not have survived television, but its idea still lingers, waiting for a time when optimism feels relevant again. Number 5. Jason of Star Command, 1978. Fast action, strange creatures, a hero racing through space with barely enough time to survive. Jason of Star Command was built for urgency. Every episode feels like a sprint, a continuous chase across planets and dangers that never slow down. At its core, the show follows a commander tasked with protecting the galaxy from a powerful and unpredictable enemy. The stakes are always immediate: rescue missions, sabotage operations, encounters with bizarre alien threats. The structure leaves no room for stillness. What makes it unique is its serialized format. Instead of standalone stories, it unfolds in short segments that build on each other. Viewers had to return week after week to understand the full arc. For its time, this approach was unusual. Television favored closure. This show demanded commitment. Visually, it embraced creativity over realism. Effects were limited, but imagination filled the gaps. Strange worlds were suggested rather than fully shown. Creatures felt theatrical, yet memorable. It created a sense of scale without having the resources to support it. But timing worked against it. The release of Star Wars changed audience expectations overnight. Suddenly, space adventure needed to feel massive, cinematic, polished. Compared to that new standard, this series felt small. Attention shifted, interest faded, and the show was left behind. What remains is a snapshot of transition, a moment just before television sci-fi was forced to evolve or disappear. A series caught between imagination and expectation. It did not fail because it lacked energy. It failed because the world around it changed too quickly, and it could not keep up. Number 4. Quark, 1977. A garbage ship drifting through space does not sound like the beginning of satire. But that is exactly where Quark begins. Not with heroes, not with exploration, but with waste, the leftovers of a civilization that has already consumed too much. At the center is a reluctant commander tasked with hauling cosmic trash across the universe. Around him exists a crew that feels deliberately absurd, clones who speak in unison, an emotionless computer with questionable judgment, a system that feels less like progress and more like parody. What makes this series unusual is its tone. It does not celebrate science fiction. It dissects it. Every trope is turned inside out. Space missions become bureaucratic routines. Alien encounters feel pointless. Even the idea of heroism is reduced to obligation. This approach was bold but risky. Audiences expected wonder. They expected adventure. Instead, they were given irony, a mirror reflecting the genre itself rather than expanding it. The timing worked against it. Satirical science fiction had not yet found its place on television. Viewers were not prepared to laugh at something they still took seriously. The humor felt strange. The structure felt unfamiliar. And so it vanished almost immediately. A single season, barely remembered. But looking back, it feels strangely ahead of its time. Modern audiences are comfortable with self-aware storytelling. They understand parody layered over concept. In many ways, Quark predicted a shift that would not fully arrive until decades later. It was not erased because it lacked intelligence. It was erased because it arrived before its audience existed. A joke told too early. A signal lost before it could be understood. Number 3. Man from Atlantis, 1977. He emerges from the ocean without memory. A man who does not belong to the surface yet cannot return to the depths. That is the quiet mystery at the heart of Man from Atlantis. A story not about space, but about isolation within the unknown. The character possesses abilities that set him apart. He can breathe underwater, swim at impossible speeds, survive pressures that would destroy any human. But these powers do not bring freedom. They create distance. He exists between worlds, accepted by neither. Each episode explores that tension. Scientific missions into the ocean become journeys into identity. Discoveries beneath the surface reveal fragments of a past that refuses to fully return. The deeper he goes, the less certain he becomes of who he is. What makes the series compelling is its tone. It is slower, more reflective. It does not rely on spectacle. It builds atmosphere through silence and uncertainty. The ocean becomes a character, vast, unpredictable, hiding truths that may never be uncovered. Despite this unique approach, the show struggled to maintain attention. Action-driven audiences found it too restrained. Networks saw inconsistent performance and made the decision to end it early. Unlike many entries on this list, it did not completely disappear. It survived through occasional broadcasts in memory. But it never achieved lasting cultural weight. It remained suspended between recognition and obscurity, much like its central figure, a presence that exists, yet never fully belongs. A story about searching for origin, and never quite finding it. Number 2. Timeslip, 1970. A barrier exists that no one can see until it is crossed. A line between present and past that opens without warning. In Timeslip, that invisible threshold becomes a doorway into history itself. The story follows two teenagers who stumble into a strange temporal anomaly. One moment they stand in their own time. The next, they are thrown into different eras, World War settings, Cold War paranoia, scientific experiments that feel dangerously real. Each journey reveals not just events, but consequences that ripple across time. What makes this series stand apart is its intelligence. It does not treat time travel as spectacle. It treats it as responsibility. Every action carries weight. Every interference creates unintended effects. The characters are not heroes. They are witnesses trapped in a system they barely understand. There is a quiet tension in every episode, not from explosions or conflict, but from uncertainty. Will they return home? Will they change something they cannot undo? Will they even recognize their own reality if they succeed? Produced in Britain, the show carried a different tone from American science fiction of the same era. It was more grounded, more reflective, less interested in visual scale, and more focused on ideas. Yet that same restraint limited its reach. It did not travel widely across international markets. It remained confined to a specific audience and slowly faded from broader memory. What remains is a thoughtful exploration of time and consequence, a reminder that the past is never truly distant, and that even the smallest change can echo beyond control. Number 1. Planet of the Apes, 1974. A world turned upside down. Humanity reduced to silence while another species rises to dominance. Planet of the Apes brought a powerful cinematic idea to television, but what worked on the big screen struggled to survive in a weekly format. Set after the events of the original films, the series follows human survivors navigating a society ruled by intelligent apes. The structure mirrors a familiar pattern: escape, capture, resistance. Each episode builds on the tension between oppression and survival. What makes this adaptation compelling is its attempt to expand the mythology. It explores the rules of this inverted civilization, the hierarchy, the fear, the fragile systems holding power in place. It asks deeper questions about control, identity, and what defines intelligence. But television constraints limited its impact. Budgets restricted scale. Makeup and sets could not match the cinematic version. Stories became repetitive. The sense of danger slowly weakened. Audience expectations were also shifting. After the success of the original films, viewers expected something larger, something more immersive. Instead, they received a contained version of a grand idea. The result was inevitable: one season, then cancellation. Despite its short life, the series holds a strange place in science fiction history, not a failure of concept, but a reminder that some stories demand a certain scale to survive. It did not disappear because it lacked meaning. It disappeared because it could not fully become what it was meant to be: a powerful vision reduced before it could evolve. Some stories do not end. They disappear, waiting for the right moment to be seen again. These shows were not just canceled. They were abandoned by time itself. But now you have seen them. And maybe that is how they survive. Not on television, but in memory.